By the 1940s, even 30s, you had dials on the phone so you could place your own phone calls. You just have to, the technology, you can do that. And it's the same situation now. With the phone network, phone companies have probably, everybody's going to have to be an operator. Just like we're running out of spectrum now. It's just, at this point, there's no reason to have a phone company. Okay. And as a matter of fact, they're continuing to try the same things. They're trying to say, I've got an essay on my site, Assuring Scarcity, where they explicitly say they have to prevent abundance by limiting capacity. They have to buy services from them, and they're still doing it. And it's very interesting to look back at the Deal of the Century, written by Stephen Cullen, who happens to be running the New America Foundation, about we did before we understood the internet, how the throes AT&T went through trying to come to terms, and today the company called AT&T now, of course, is not the original one. The company we have now is one that has expertise in identity theft because they bought the name of the garage sale in New Jersey. So we need a break from the past. So we have the phone company view of the internet. It's got applications, you've got wires, and they've got all these services they sell you, one of which is internet, as if it's another television channel. That's a fantasy. What really happened is we basically invented the bit. We can normalize all information as bits. Or if you're not that technical, think of it as letters of the alphabet and movable type. So you don't need a separate provider for each service. And one of the things that I argue Moore's law is about marketplaces. Because we have this, we can now oysterize everything by basically taking any path for bits and using it. Now, it might not be a fast path, but we have to find a use for it. We can't rely on promises. What's confusing now is this idea has worked so well, as I said, because of the web and things, we assume video works. Think of how amazing that is. There are no promises at Skype. There are no QoS or anything like that promised with the network. It just works. So this is how powerful the dynamic is. And as soon as you try to do anybody a favor, you break it. That's the counterintuitive part, which makes it so hard to understand the policy issue. The more favors you do, the worse it gets. And I put relationships, not just applications. So Skype is about relationships. And one other confusing thing is the current internet does not do relationships. I cannot connect a light switch to a light fixture using the internet protocols because there are no stable identifiers. The IP address will keep changing on you. So that's why we have this absurd thing and actually run wires to a light as control. I mean, can you imagine having to run a wire between the signal source and the destination? You'd wind up with a maze of wires covering the sky. So one confusing thing, we skipped past, the word information came through. So how many of you know what information means? Yes. Unfortunately, how many of you confuse the word work in physics with the word work that you pay people for? Well, then why do you confuse this word Claude Shannon happened to use for his measure of bits with anything that has to do with human value? So do you remember that chart about value going up? Well, the value doesn't go up here. It's totally decoupled. If the value is not going up, the dollars aren't going down. So the very concept of telecommunications no longer makes sense. But because we have all those words, I told you, cost, price, we think we know what they mean. We're keeping a concept alive as if we had people walking in front of cars so they didn't scare the horses. It's not a moral thing. They're not being immoral. They're just doing what they're taught in business schools. Keep your business alive no matter what. And this is not people. They have to die so we can all live. That's why we have bankruptcy laws. Now, the reason the phone companies can't charge for value is meaning. The value of the meaning is not in the bits. Okay, so if you see a message on the network, meet me in 5, what does that mean? How important is that? Do I have to get that through, or is it optional? The network, at a very fundamental philosophical level, cannot know that. It cannot know if your message is meet me in 5 minutes, drinks, or not, I don't care. Or if the message is meet me in 5 seconds on the defibrillator. It can't know. And to the extent it tries to know, it's going to be wrong. It's either going to give you a busy signal because it's giving everything priority, or it's going to do like the thing called buffer bloat. All the favors of network now, like buffering, break things. The less favors, the better it can work. Okay, so the way to think about the transition is carriers use their rights of way, the materials. We gave them all the wires, sort of like the railroads. We gave them huge swaths of real estate, and in return they would transport us. There are actually real estate companies who got sprint out of it, but that's another story. But instead of providing the services now, we do it ourselves. So all they're giving us is bits. And the problem is, the more bits they give us, two things happen. The less value there is, like too much milk, the value goes below cost. And we're not going to buy their services, they can't make any money. That's the situation. They're threatened by abundance. So, and this is why we need a different business model. You're not going to fix telecommunication. Network neutrality only feeds them, because that gives them more power to be neutral. If they were indifferent, if the value didn't exist, those issues would be moved. So we really have to think telecom. The reason that rent seekers selling us back at scarcity is not because somebody came up with this great scheme to hold the infrastructure hostage. It's just they had the infrastructure from the days when they were by the railroads, and we haven't figured out it no longer makes sense. We need to put them out of their misery and us out of their misery. So the key thing to understand the internet is it's not about reaching things far away. If you can, great. But it's about turning on your light without having to run wires, filling up the ceiling with all these control wires. So, so I've got devices here I want to connect. Like this is my current computer. And these phones I can connect to each other, This is a peer connection. It's not about the phone company. Wi-Fi calling, they're not involved at all. Well, they might own the database temporarily, but that's just because they're controlling the phones. But these are just peer devices. And this device, you see the little module here? That's a full Android computer, which is a building block. Matter of fact, I have one of them sitting right here. This one happens to be functioning as a watch. It's got radios. I've got a TI one with all sorts of accelerometers and all sorts. These are interesting platforms. And you want to connect it to other devices nearby or wherever. We need to discover what's possible. And lines in the Serengeti have collars. Not Serengeti, Kenya. That's not the Serengeti, is it? Or whatever. That's in South Africa. Wherever it's in Kenya, the lions all have cellular phones. Because you need to track them. They're endangered, scarce, you want to catch poachers, so the lions all have cellular phones. And they've got a free account. But the Maasai warriors cannot get their cows connected because the phone, they don't want to pay for a cellular account for phone. They're not going to get it free. Of course, if they didn't have a phone company and they just had, generic connectivity, that would work. You can track your cows. You can do all sorts of things. In my house, that might look like a light switch, but it simply sends a message to the lamp on the wall. So, I put a lamp up on the wall, no need to run a wire, just to find the control relationship, and that's it. The door locks can be smart and connected, they can have local policy. You want the door lock to always work decoupled, but you should be able to basically change the policy. And of course, it's not just device, it's applications. Skype to Skype relationships don't depend on your IP address. And I was going to get this working, didn't quite get it. There's an application, unified remote control I have for this. I could have been controlling the presentation with this. This connected directly here over Bluetooth, which is only a link protocol. It doesn't extend, but you program around it. So we're good. We're still in 1880. We've got the pieces, and we have a sense, and though we still think it's listening to operas far away, but we're slowly figuring out the purpose of speaking to people. And the term I like is ambient connectivity, which is the idea that you can just assume you can make a connection anywhere. Now, you assume it with caution. In other words, you can't depend on it being there, so you have to be resilient. But if you take advantage of the opportunity, without having to worry about all the underwater sea reefs, Russian term for bugs, that trip you up. If you want to connect, JetBlue might give you a connection in T5 in New York, but some lawyer is gone and destroy the value by saying you got to remember to go into a browser, even on a device without a browser, read a legal agreement, call up your lawyer, and by the time you call your lawyer, pay $300 and everything, you then click agree. Or you can lie. So we're all criminalized. So Skype is user to user, IP protocols, current internet protocols. Remember, this is an engineering prototype. They did for the days when machines didn't move around, it's not as stable. IPv6 doesn't fix this. So yeah, we should do IPv6 for the shims, but for the message of ISOC is you gotta really understand the internet is about relationships, and you start with the applications. You don't start with the network. The internet, we talk about bellheads and netheads, they're all bellheads as far as I'm concerned. We need applicants. And you can repurpose anything, even Bluetooth, okay? And the PC is, an open platform innovation so far. Redox servers, everybody's trying to lock these down. I'm amazed I got in the building without showing my ID. Okay, so we need a business model which is very simple. If you do the sidewalks, the community gets together, pays people for label the materials. We don't pay them for service. You don't pay them when you walk on the sidewalk. You just pay for the sidewalks if you want them. You don't need a sidewalk all the time, but at some point you decide, get together, put a sidewalk. And value is in the whole, which is why the sidewalks are the model, not the railroads. It's like the roads. How many think we have a road system? Well, we do because somebody went up, and it's whole story to tell about inventing road numbers. But there's no system. A lot of local roads, we just have somebody name it and call it a system. It's not like the railroads, which is a managed system. And the key thing is you don't want to exclude people to create value. What Kristen is trying to bring people in. It's not a model where you have to pay every device. I mean, the hotel. I was able to connect this. I knew it was complimentary. I would have set a separate account for this one and a separate account for this. It's ridiculous at some point. So we can act locally. That's the key. You can act locally with our neighbors, and we can get local dense coverage. And once you get dense coverage, you can then, we don't have connected devices now. When you have dense coverage, you enable innovations like the connected pacemaker, which you can't do if the coverage is too thin. This is opportunities. You don't do things that are not going to work, but as soon as you have enough capacity, you start doing those innovations. And that's where we'll start to get to 1900, when you can actually call somebody up if you're not going to make the appointment. You start to know people far enough away, you have to phone them. And you get thin coverage, like the mesh in Vienna places, or the one in Spain, you'll find other things about it. So the idea is we can aggregate all our purchasing. So if you're in an apartment house, all get together, the economy of scale is dramatic, like Ruff knows, to all get together to make a purchase and share it. Or, if you all have your separate purchases, you can contribute to the commons and share it widely. One of the paradoxes is, if you have 10 wires, if the 10 people, each of them getting a wire, you get 1x. Each has 1x. If you aggregate them all, statistically, actually, once you get above certain thresholds, because we don't want to talk about speed, but you get up, well, the first trillion bytes per second or something, 10 wires to 10 people, give each of them 10 times the capacity. So you're getting 100 times capacity or more. So again, aggregate purchasing, but also put together what we've purchased. So this is your classic apartment house. So it's an 800, who cares? You can then, one thing for the digital divide, which I think is a terrible term, putting aside, just teach people how to share a modem. And you fed 10 families instead of one. And going to the bubble baby networks, yes, they need routing, but that's a whole other bad design protocol. We have to work around what we have now, but don't assume that you have a marginal line around each house forever. Somebody might just fly over it. So again, this I've gone on, so I'll just briefly say, understanding is the key. And there's enthusiasm. Imagine we take all the network neutrality enthusiasm, all the OpenNet, and switch to DIY empowerment. The phone companies would be gone within days. So think of it, rather than neutrality, you want a comment, you want indifference. And instead of open, you want to make open move. There's nothing to open. It's like, I hate the term unlicensed spectrum. Who came up with license spectrum? Who created a worldwide police state to make sure you don't buy the wrong color paint? You're buying red paint, sorry, your neighbor has red. You can't have it because when you come home at night, you won't know which house to go to. So the main message is you can act locally to contribute to the opportunity. That's really why, yeah, petition the NCC, sure, we should do that. I mean, it's not as if we should allow them to continue to police colors. But don't expect change from an organization who's defined to keep the companies they created alive, by definition. The FCC has no purpose otherwise. So it's, I mean, the whole regulatorium is this ball of wax. Sure, it's floated away from the earth, but once you get into it, you'll never get out. And it's an iterative process. You know, I'm just giving you a hint because the irony is the more I understand, the more I know problems are intractable. So I can go on about extra slides and slide bucket, but I also forgot to bring in a business card, so use a QR code if you want to contact me. Or else go to my site, and where the word public is, there are keywords. Like to read ensuring scarcity, just type ensuring scarcity, and that's the keyword for that essay. So, to spare you the rest of my slides, I'll stop here so we can have a lot of questions.
Thank you. Let's have a big round of applause again for our great speakers. Before we move on to the Q&A, I'd like everybody here from the Internet Society to stand up.
What do you want, members or
this chapter? DC chapter.
DC chapter, and anybody from the mothership.
So the next thing
New York chapter, any chapter.
David,
yes.
Now you can say, would all the people who are about to be members stand up?
Talk to us. See, these people here are part of the Internet Society. If you want to get more involved, talk to any of them. We have a whole bunch of great events coming up. Our next happy hour is at the Science Club on 19th Street in DC on March 13th at 6:30. It could end anytime. Keep an eye on our site, ISOC-DC.org, for a list of future events. And my other co-chair, Mike Nelson, is going to tell us about some very interesting events coming up.
Just wanted to put a few things on your calendar. March 21st, we're going to have our next breakfast at Busboys and Poets. As you know, this is a nice environment for a roundtable discussion. The topic will be the upcoming ITU meeting at the